Welcome to another episode of Bobo, Mango, and Donovan's Void. We're here today in the Jurassic Park to have an ancient conversation, to discuss a question that really dates back to the beginnings of humankind, really. That really dates back to the beginning of romantic love. And the question we want to discuss today is the age-old question, can men and women just be friends? Specifically, the question today is, can you be friends with someone that you are sexually attracted to? And as much as this seems like a really reductive and boring and stupid question that's overplayed, I find it interesting not because of the question itself per se, but because of how much it interferes with so many romantic relationships.
Right.
And I find it particularly interesting because it's a really layered question. It's a question that interrogates the nature of romantic love. It's a question that interrogates the nature of friendship. It's a question that interrogates the nature of sexuality as well, and the nature of sexual desire. It's also deeply a question about free will, and we'll discuss that. And there's so much to unpack in that question. So I thought we'd bring it to the platform, and we'd have a discussion. Today's episode is going to be a debate. It's going to be a debate. Donovan is going to be the reasonable one. He's going to be the reasonable guy with the reasonable take. And I'm going to be the Gemini. So I'll start with my thesis, which is you can be friends with someone you're attracted to. Sure. But is that friendship platonic? Is that friendship sincere? More importantly, is that friendship sincere? Can sexual desire really coexist harmoniously with platonic love? That's really the question I want to interrogate today. And this is really a question about patriarchy. It's a question about womanhood as it's been constructed in this society. And it's also a question about monogamy and the assumptions that we make about it, the assumptions that we make about romantic love. And I'm not really of the belief that you can be friends platonically, sincerely friends with someone that you're attracted to just because of the power dynamics inherent in that. And also because of the construct of masculinity. When men are involved in this equation, I don't know that sexual desire can exist in a hetero friendship and it be sincere. I can't with good faith look you in the eye. And the first reason is because men and women are raised in opposition to each other. We've said this before a million times, but this is really the crux of the argument. It's the fact that you, as a man, are raised and conditioned to view women in a certain way. Men are conditioned to view women as sexual objects first before they are human. Women are conditioned to view men as their superiors and therefore as human. So to be a man is to be a human. To be a woman is to be a gender. So that's the first discrepancy.
Okay.
The second is the Madonna whore complex. And I don't know who came up with this theory, but the Madonna whore complex is essentially the idea that men can only view women either as a Madonna, which is to say as a nurturing, caring, mammy-like figure, or as a whore, which is to say as a sexual object, as an object of sexual desire, but never as both at the same time. And you see this when you look at how many hetero marriages collapse over time. At the beginning of the marriage, the woman is the object of sexual desire, but as soon as she births a child, she now becomes this maternal figure and can no longer be really engaged with sexually. Just that transition itself tells us a lot about the way that sexual desire functions in relation to patriarchy. Or rather, the way that sexual desire functions towards women in the context of patriarchy. And with those two factors in mind, and those are just, we'll start there. We'll start there because I'm going to need to give you some time to speak. With those two factors in mind, I cannot with good faith look you in the eye and tell you that I believe that a man could be sexually attracted to me, but we have a sincere friendship where there's really sincere love for who I am as a human, as an individual, and not who I am as a sexual being. Because sex is inherently dehumanizing in a world where men interact with women through porn. The first romantic sexual interaction that the average man has with a woman outside of your mother is porn. What does that do to a man's brain? That's already being socialized to believe that women are subservient, women come from the rib of the man. What does that do to the brain? How are you even capable of being friends with a woman at all in that context? Sex aside, sexual desire aside. And what I find also is that if you were to put 100 men in a room and you ask them, can men and women just be friends? 90% of them are like, nah, of course not. If you put 100 women in a room and you ask, can men and women just be friends? 90% of them are like, yeah, of course, I have so many friends. I love Josh. That discrepancy alone shows us that it's impossible, because friendship is inherently mutual. And the fact that we're raised in opposition to each other also means that we inherently view and navigate friendships differently from each other. And I think in a world where men are really only conditioned to respect other men, I don't know that men are encouraged to hold space for women's full identities enough to have a sincere friendship with them, regardless of sexual desire. Thoughts?
You know, it's not like anything you're saying isn't true. I've read bell hooks as well. You know, I get it. I get it. Those socialization. No, I get it. But the question wasn't that. The question is whether or not men and women can be friends. And right now we're operating under this premise of women can fuck 70% of the men in their phone, 80% depending on how their family gets down. And that's just the premise, right? Women are the gatekeepers of sex. Men are the ones with the lust for it. One, I have a problem with that. It's very gender essentialist. It's this idea that women are not sexual agents. Women are not sexually proactive. They don't also lust. They don't also want. One, that's a problem I have. And two, the real question is like, well, how does the world get better? We understand that the problem is gender itself. We understand the problem is the essentialization of these arbitrary, stupid roles itself. And when it comes to people's relationships, I find that they're always so worried about who their partner is hanging out with. They're always so worried about, oh, my man has this friend and I don't know her. And I think they're always so worried about external people, external forces ruining their relationships. But when I look at people's relationships, the threat is always internal.
Talk about it.
The call is coming from inside the house most of the time. And the amount of time people waste worrying about external forces ruining their relationship is laughable when you look at what actually ends up ruining it. And if you think about it, we're so keen on our partners never having friends of the sex that they're attracted to. When those are the same friends that they're going to look to for counsel when you guys are having a relationship problem. So although you've been so insistent on your man never being friends with other women, who do you want him talking to when he has a problem with your guys' relationship? You want him talking to 13 bonehead idiot men? Or do you want him talking to women that can maybe counsel him and help him to see things from your perspective? And I think that although things currently are as bad as you described, they will only get worse if we keep on subscribing to this idea that men and women shouldn't be friends. Because the only way that men and women relationships would get better is if we were platonic friends. Because then we would see each other as humans. You know? There's that saying, like, there's three sides to every story, your side, my side, and then the truth. How do you get to that point where you can actually hold empathy for the opposite sex if your only relationship to them is this hypercharged, sexualized binary? It's never that of friendship relationship?
Yeah.
How could you ever view a woman as human if you guys have never just went out to coffee and talked and there wasn't this inherent, tension of like, is she gonna let me put my pee in her?
Yeah.
How could things ever get better if
Yeah.
we're not just friends? And, maybe it's very anecdotal because my best friends in my entire life have been women.
Yeah.
And it's never been a problem. It's never been... To me, here's another thing. Men and women square each other up immediately.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
men know whether or not they want to fuck you immediately, and
Right.
women know in about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah.
The central tension is either there or it's not.
Yeah.
So this idea of like Oonga Boonga caveman shit, where it's like every man wants to fuck every woman, first of all, is not true. So, second of all, men and women are just so much more similar than like this insanely divided culture war wants you to think they are. We share 70% of the same DNA with bananas.
Yeah.
Men
Yeah.
and women are virtually the exact same. There are mild differences. The idea that you can't be friends with half of the population because they have a different gonad
Yeah.
is kind of insane.
Yeah.
And most importantly, I think that everything that I have as far as like my toolkit of like being a half decent boyfriend
Yeah.
comes from my platonic relationships with women. Because I had a lot of platonic relationships with women growing up, I've always just humanized you guys.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't get how men could be any better unless you guys let us hang out with some other women.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, for
Yeah.
the sake of our relationship.
For this, no, okay.
Let me go to
hear
Tiffany's
you.
house.
Yeah, I hear you, and I actually agree with everything you're saying. And to clarify, I don't think that men and women shouldn't be friends.
No.
I question whether it's possible in this context, in
Yeah.
this environment.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. I think we need to get to a point where there is enough velocity of equality, where there's just enough of that,
Yeah.
where there's just enough of an equal playing field that we can just both view each other as humans.
Right.
But the problem is, power dynamics inherently create problems. And hegemonic power dynamics inherently just create relational problems. This extends far beyond romance. It's for the same reason getting into a relationship with your boss is problematic territory because they have power over you. They just have that. So is that advisable?
Yeah.
Should it be possible? Yeah. But we'd have to live in a non-capitalist, egalitarian society in order for bosses and employees to be fair. And we currently don't live in that society first. So I agree. Men and women need to get to a point
Right.
where we can be friends. But the question is, can that be done in this hyper-hegemonic capitalist society? Or do we need, that book, Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism? Just that title, I've never even read the book, but that title is how I feel. We can only have better relations with each other.
Yeah, when things are less transactional.
When things are less transactional, but also when power dynamics aren't so exploitative.
But my point is, let's start and we'll be better off for it. And I think that's something that women don't realize is how much men avoid accountability, and you guys aid in that through this narrative that men are these dogs that can't control their actions. By accepting that premise, how much you guys actually let us off the hook and make our lives easier.
Ooh, explain.
Because, first of all, I hate this idea that like everything is about the body and there are just these things that we can't control. I don't
Yeah.
subscribe to the idea that, we're bodies with a soul as opposed to like souls with a body.
Yeah.
I'm a man. I know what it's like to have a dick. I know what it's like to want to fuck everything that moves. And
Yeah.
I also know that we can control it unless you have a literal addiction. And I think 90% of men saying they have a sex addiction are full of shit.
Yeah.
It's actually because we've created this society where this narrative that men are dogs has allowed us to evade all accountability because I have a dick.
Yeah.
And it gets hard.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, well, you can still control yourself.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life being friends, platonic friends,
Yeah.
with women that are objectively attractive,
Yeah.
and I've managed it.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing about being a man is that you need to accept that this monster is inside of you and manage it. Because there is something true about the idea that once men are in a certain position, it's very difficult for anything to go any other type of way.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Explain.
This is me accepting that this is how men evade accountability. But I'm also trying to get to the delicate truth at the core of it. As a man, once your dick is hard, there is no free will. And we live in a completely deterministic universe where absolutely nothing can be avoided.
I love this take.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
There is no free will when the dick is hard.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We live in a deterministic universe once the dick is hard.
Yeah.
So, as a man... And this is actually a piece of advice from my uncle, which is the best piece of advice anyway. It's better than my 18 years of formal education. He told me to always masturbate before I leave the house. And you will save yourself so much pain.
Yeah.
And the way that I always deal with it is like knowing this part of being a man, knowing that you are a monster, a demon from hell. You actually have to just avoid ever being in the situation to begin with.
Right.
So if I'm in a relationship and I want to be friends with a woman that is sexually attractive to me, one, I have to ask myself, okay, why do I want to be friends with her? Do I want to be friends with her just to fuck?
Yeah.
That rules out 99% of women that you should be hanging out with, because the truth is that you just want to fuck. But if there's something else there, if there's something about her mind or her personality that's interesting, I think that you should pursue that. You should pursue that with caution. So if I'm in a relationship and I'm going to hang out with a woman I'm friends with that I find sexually attractive, first of all, beating my dick before I leave the crib. There's absolutely... I'm leaving the crib without a loaded weapon. First of all. Second of all, I'm going to make sure I'm never inebriated around this person. I'm going to make sure that I'm always in a position where I have my capacities, where I can make good decision making. And third of all, I'm going to make sure that we're always in a situation where, like, we know what this is. You know, I have a girlfriend, if you have a partner or whatever. And, like, it can be managed. We can't keep up this narrative that, like, men are these wild dogs that if you don't keep us on a leash, madness is going to happen, because it enables our own violence. It's inherently the problem, and women play into it just as much as men do. And secretly, we understand the advantage of it. This idea that men are just dogs that cannot be trained benefits us. And I know that it's scary to maybe give the men in your life a little bit more freedom, but it's the only way that things get better. And I think that it really just touches on a very childish insecurity we all have with our partners, that they're not supposed to be attracted to other people.
Let's talk about that. The second
we agree to be in a monogamous relationship, there is a neurochemical process that happens that when you see other women, dopamine no longer floods your synapses, and your dick is actually just supposed to retreat into your belly button anytime you're around any woman but me. That's childish.
Absolutely.
Men are monsters designed to impregnate as many different kinds of women as possible. Your man is going to find other women attractive.
Of course.
Women are designed to find any man that is competent or useful or attractive in their own right. You know? So the idea that your partner isn't going to be attracted to other people, trying to avoid that attraction, it's just inherently a flawed premise to begin with, right? You're pouring water into a cup with a hole at the bottom. There's no fixing that. All you can do is manage it and have a mature relationship to each other to know that you're not going to ever actually act on those urges. But the idea that you're going to try and curate a life for your partner where they never get stimulated by other people to begin with is insane. And it's why people become so miserable in their relationships, which is what I was originally saying, where it's, hey guys, the call is coming from inside the house. You're so worried about these external forces. It's internal. What causes the internal problems? Lack of external stimuli. You will be a better person if you can hang out with whoever you want, and that will make your relationship better.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you touched on two things that I want to unpack even further. The first is, the point that you just made, which is that the call is coming from inside. The collapse of relationships is often internal. And the first question I have for you is, what, in your opinion, is the internal injury that causes the collapse of relationships? The second question I have for you is, I think we are having two different conversations in the sense that we're diagnosing two different problems. And to bring it back to sort of the same conversation, because I feel like we're agreeing on pretty much everything, except the question of what came first. Are men the way they are because of their environment? or is the environment of patriarchy what it is because of men? So the question I was asking earlier, which is that can men and women really truly just be sincere friends in this patriarchal hegemonic context? It's not really a question of should men and women be friends. It's a question of what needs to change first. My thesis is that in order for men and women to even be able to like have sincere, genuine relationship, friendships or not, sincere, genuine romantic love, because I think this problem extends way past friendship. I think it's a problem that we find in all of our relationships with men, whether it's your dad or your brother or your friend or your husband or your boyfriend. I think the problems that we all bump into as women with our relationships with men are very systemic, I feel.
Yeah.
And I wonder if those problems, which is, can you please just engage me as a normal human? Can you please just engage me as a full human? Is the problem that we tend to run into, where your husband just like refuses to be emotionally available for you. Not refuses literally, but just is unable. Or your dad stands outside the house with a rifle on prom night.
Right.
Or you know, or like these problems that we have with the men in our lives where we're reduced to sexual objects.
Right.
Can that ever be addressed in this environment? Could we ever find common ground and sincere love, any kind of love, in this context?
Well, first of all, it begins with stopping this bullshit gender essentialization shit. This men are from Mars, women are from Venus, men eat steak, women eat salad. We're all sexual beings with sexual desires. The dildo market has exploded too much for this narrative of men are the only people with this insatiable lust for sex to persist. We need to accept that we're all horny animals that are kind of demons from hell. That, right? Like, can we just get that? Can we start there?
Like, you mean humans or men?
Humans.
All of
humans.
us. Okay,
like, at this point in time, and then maybe this is actually only true at this current moment, I truly think women are just as horny and have just as much of a lustful, insatiable eye.
Absolutely.
Like,
but isn't this an interesting question then? Knowing that women are just as horny and sexual as men, for the most part, isn't it interesting then that we are, by and large, the ones that still feel we can be friends with the people we're attracted to, whereas, by and large, most men don't feel that they can do that?
Right.
Is that discrepancy not an indication of how the environment and the context we live in makes sincere love impossible between the two genders?
Well, that's completely socialization. Because when men cheat, there is an inherent societal
encouragement or incentive?
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Just acceptance. You know? When a man has a family and he cheats, you know, it's like a slap on the wrist situation. Oh my God, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
But then generally things fall back in line. When women cheat, it's the end of the goddamn world. It's like the entire family ends up collapsing, and then the man is scorned for the rest of his life. That is very societal. Both men and women perpetuate that guilt and that shame around women's infidelity as well. And it comes from this very ancient puritanical place of seeking virginity. This idea that women had to stay pure in order to confirm who the father was before actual modern medical technology. But it's one of those things with patriarchy where it's like, okay, well, now we have paternity tests and meat is in the store. So why are we still doing all of these archaic draconian traditions of like post-agricultural revolution patriarchy? But to answer your original question of like, what creates the lustful eye to begin with, right? I don't believe in these gender essentialist ideas that like men are the only sexual people and women are just these.
Absolutely.
So on a human level, what is it that starts that lust? A lot of people think it has to do with externalities, that your man is just gonna see some woman one day and just be overcome and just not be able to control himself. And your job as a wife is to walk around with your man all day and just put hands over his eyes and make sure he never sees someone else. But I find that people rarely cheat because of their partners.
They actually
cheat
never- yeah.
because of something happening with themselves. They cheat because they're trying to recapture a version of themselves that they feel like they lost in the relationship, right? The truth is that if you want someone to stay faithful to you, you have to create an environment where they never feel so dislocated from themselves that they need to go fuck someone else to get back in tune with who they are.
Is that something that someone can do for someone else, or is that something that has to be done for yourself? This is kind of a tangent, but it just is something
Well, what you
I'm
have to do
interested
for your
in.
partner is give them freedom. It is inherently not letting your boyfriend go on a coffee date with his woman friend from college or something that will make him fuck her.
Yeah.
Because when he goes on that coffee date with the friend and they catch up on old times, they tell old college stories, he gets back in tune with who that old version of himself. When you don't let him do that, that festers and that creates this monster inside of him. And he goes, I need to actually do something extreme to get back in touch with that person.
Yeah.
And I need to hide it from my wife, from my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And that leads to the infidelity. It is inherently the attempt to prevent the infidelity of your partner that creates it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those it's one of those so many backwards things that we have in society. It's like how we address crime completely backwards, where it's like crime is caused by bad people who do bad things, as opposed to crime is caused by poverty. Cheating is the same way. Cheating is not caused because men are these insatiable dogs that cannot be controlled. Cheating is caused by the fact that we've created such an alienating society through the nuclear family, through the 40-hour work week, that men have to do something so extreme to just feel alive again.
To recapture a part of an identity that's been lost.
Another thing is that people need to make sure their relationships are fucking exciting. The second you get married and get a mortgage, you basically know what every single day for the rest of your life until you die is going to be. Humans lose their fucking minds when we are confronted with that.
Yeah.
You know?
And I actually really love that you bring this up, because I was just reading about this in the context of trauma. I've been studying a lot about trauma and its effects on the brain and just how the brain works. And there's a social psychologist by the name of Eric Fromm. I'm sure maybe a lot of you will be familiar with him. And he has this theory about identity and the ways that the construct of identities creates trauma that I find really interesting. And he says essentially humans, as much as we like to feel and think of ourselves as unique, idiosyncratic beings, we're actually more similar to ants in a colony than we are to unique little stars or constellations in the sky. And the reason we're so similar to ants in a colony is because human identity is created in relation to the needs of the colony. So, for example, with ants, you can either become the queen or the worker ant or what's the other ant? There's 3 types of ants. I forgot what the third one is. And who you become in the ant colony entirely depends on what your specific colony needs. So if your colony needs more worker ants at the time that you're born, you'll end up being a worker ant. And essentially, humans are really the same. Our identities are constructed in relation to what the needs of our society are. And so the social identity is the identity that's constructed in you from the second you hop out the womb. This identity is constructed and put into you in relation to what this society needs, which is why everyone is either a slave or a consumer. This is what I was talking about in the last episode. And then the second identity that we all have is what he calls the personal identity, which is the things that make us feel like we're different. It's the things that you like foot fetish porn, or you actually want to be a philosopher instead of a factory worker. And the reason so many of us are traumatized from so young is because personal identity is often eroded for the benefit of social identity. And our personal identities, I won't even use the word eroded. I would actually use the word hijacked. Our personal identities are hijacked from the second we hop out the womb. and we are given then in its place a social identity. And that is inherently a traumatic process.
Right.
And we actually don't, as a society, address the trauma that, and it comes in a lot of different ways. It can come from you being born in a society where being straight is the norm. That's the normative thing to do. Now, if you're gay, that now creates inherently a psychological internal injury in you, and that's traumatic. It can be as big as that, or it can just be as big as like you want to be a philosopher that sits on the beach and yells about the state of modern life.
Right.
But the society you're born in
Right.
wants you to clean kitchens for white women in Cape Town
Right.
that beat you with a and because I don't want to do that. I don't. That's my internal injury.
Yeah.
And I think cheating is a really good example of how traumatic it is to have the parts of your identity hijacked in favor of larger social identities.
Yeah.
And marriage is very similar to childhood in the fact that the construct of marriage is so normative and it's so homogenous that anyone who deviates even a little bit is actually traumatized, because we're humans who are designed to want to fit in with the social norms of our culture. But when they're so rigid, it is inherently traumatizing to deviate from them.
Right.
And marriage is a construct that is inherently traumatizing because it's so homogenous and it's so specific.
Yeah.
And it requires such specific rules and ways
it's
of
extra
existing.
traumatizing.
Yeah. That when all 8 billion of us try to fit into this one mode of existence, we are now traumatized.
Right.
And we all cope with our trauma in different ways. Some people dissociate and they just leave. Like they like mentally leave the premises, and then you complain, oh, my husband is emotionally unavailable. He's traumatized. His mind has left the In other ways, you try to escape the trauma of marriage by finding an identity elsewhere, by seeking the lost parts of your identity in other people, in other women. And the show that we've been watching, Fleischman is in Trouble, is one that I really love because it explores in such depth the trauma of marriage and the idea that marriage is traumatic. It's inherently traumatic. It's a death. Yeah, because it requires a death of self from both participants.
Right.
And it gives you nothing in return.
It's
you get
interesting.
nothing.
A lot of men these days aren't getting married because they view it as a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game is a game that has no positive outcome. I'm sacrificing something without anything in return.
Yeah.
So the idea is that men want sex. It's reductive, but it's true.
Yeah,
right?
no, they do.
I can get sex without a ring, but if this doesn't work out, I lose half my shit. So what marriage then ends up becoming is, I bet you half my shit that I won't cheat on you. And that's a zero-sum game, and that's a negative game, and we should stop doing it.
Yeah.
Marriage is a really negative, toxic construct, unless you make it into whatever you want it to be. But on paper, it's this insanely hegemonic thing that virtually no one is actually cut out for.
Yeah, no one.
And what we're having now in modern dating is an extremely pervasive problem that people do not talk about enough, where I was looking at Tinder statistics, for example. Women swipe right on 5% of men. Men swipe right on 50% of women.
Interesting.
What does that tell you? There is a hegemonic definition of masculinity that all women are eyeing for.
Yeah.
All women want the same 5% of men. Happens to be men with a little bit of scratch.
Yeah.
Maybe a Bugatti in the pick might help a little bit,
Yeah.
you know? As opposed to men have absolutely no standards at all because we're told that we're not inherently worth anything. So that has led to a huge metastasizing cancer of incellery, basically.
Right.
Because when all women just want 5% of men, and men will basically take anything, you will lead to a huge vacuum of lonely men that are traumatized. And the only way to fix that is to kind of do what you're saying, which is not kill the personal identity in exchange for the social identity.
Yeah.
But that would mean being attracted to more kinds of men. which would require a re-socialization.
Absolutely.
Because I don't actually believe that women just like this specific businessy, I make 6 figures, I'm a serious man with a Roth IRA. And you know this because, like, a woman might swipe right on a guy on Tinder because he has a really expensive car, but then you ask women about cars and they couldn't care less. So you actually know that it's arbitrary. I've very rarely met women that truly have an interest in vintage McLarens, but when they see one, they swipe right. What does that mean? That means that a woman is sacrificing that personal identity for a social identity because they know that they want to do this ridiculous tradition called marriage, and their family will be more impressed by that man with the McLaren than the guy they actually really did like but has a Nissan Altima. Right. But then you ask a woman to tell you the difference between a McLaren and a Nissan Altima, and they can't. So it means that women are doing something they don't want to do. And the only way for everyone to be happier would be if people get back in touch with what their personal preferences are. What do I actually like? Do I like cars? Do I like really big houses? Do I like, having this very regimented life? Or is that just what people told me I want? Maybe I like broke niggas in a Nissan Altima, but he knows 18 different kinds of fauna. And I like him. You know what I mean?
That's my type.
And then the world gets better because that guy now gets swiped right on. He doesn't decide to shoot up a preschool, and the whole world gets better.
And the woman isn't suicidal and dissociating in a marriage with a man that she hates. And, it's really, I love that you bring that up because I'm part of this Facebook group called I Regret Having Children. And I showed you this group before. It's my favorite Facebook group. It's where I just go to study. I just go in that group and I study the human condition. And it's so fascinating because it's a group where women just vent about how much they regret having children, which is essentially, it's always a really interesting rant because it's never about the children. It's actually a group for women who regret every decision they made. It's a group for women who every day come together and ask, how did I get here? How did I end up in this prison? And it's so indicative to me of the trauma of the collective loss of personal identity. Because everyone has been hijacked and everyone is living in bad faith and doesn't even know it. Because you were hijacked so young. You were hijacked before you could even get to know your own imagination. So you don't even know that you're you just make a series of decisions from the age you're 13 when you start dating to the now you're 45 and you're like, but where did I go wrong? And the truth that's really hard to swallow is that I went wrong at 13. At 13, when I bought the first 17 magazine and I did the quiz about like, what is your wedding dress aesthetic? Is it the princess? Is it Rapunzel? Is it the second you did that quiz, you were being hijacked. The second, actually before that, when you were in preschool and you sat down and they said girls over there, boys over, you were finished. You were hijacked.
But that energy doesn't go anywhere. The energy can't be destroyed, so it ends up just retreating into your shadow self. Which is why I think
sex.
The more that relationships become these hegemonic nightmares where it's like I have the marriage and then we go to Cancun and then we get the house in Scarsdale and there's the white picket fence and I drop the kids off, and the more that life has to be that, the more your Pornhub searches get crazy. Because you're still trying to be a real person. And it's interesting. On paper, everyone says they want the same guy. On paper, everyone says they want the same woman. But you look at everyone's Pornhub searches and it's all different. So what does that mean?
What is the truth?
What does that mean? Clearly we are these little snowflakes that really like specific things. This idea that like all men like these thin, perfect, blonde white women isn't true. Go look at their... BBW is popping for a reason. A lot of men don't want that.
It's why I did this episode with Flex a couple of years ago, and we did this series on how to date. And we were talking about dating apps. Like, if you're gonna go the dating app route, Flex said something that I really like, which is be fat with your chest. If you're a fatty McFatty, you need to be your fat self and I truly
don't take the picture like this.
No, so, you need to just be.
Some men will like that
because there's so many.
There's a lot.
There's so many people that like you and your fat.
Yeah.
You need to, because there's literally nothing wrong with being fat.
Right.
Like, there's nothing wrong with being dark skinned. There's so many humans that actually think dark skinnedness is beautiful, and it's propaganda. The fact, and just go and be dark skinned with your chest, and you'll realize just how many people also like dark skinnedness.
Yeah,
like, beauty is propaganda.
You know, and it's really hard, and my number one piece of advice would be, like, keep fighting against the inertia of the position that this society is trying to push you into, because it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
It will make
it's
you
so
miserable.
hard, like, when you turn 30 and your mom starts hounding you, like, whoa, where's the ring? Where's the kids?
Yeah.
And everyone's gonna make you feel insane. Everyone's gonna make you feel like a loser. Everyone's gonna make you feel like the craziest person ever. But when you feel crazy, look at how miserable those fuckers are.
Literally.
Look at how miserable they are behind that white picket fence.
Yeah.
Look at how miserable they are with those kids and that husband that cheats on them with the secretary.
Yeah.
And use that as your motivation to keep going. Because the truth is that when you deviate from this system at all, when you leave the matrix even by an inch, people project their loss of life and all of the bullshit decisions they made onto you.
Yeah.
And they will try to curtail you back into that sphere of influence so they have to feel less bad about their shitty dog shit life.
Yes. Yep.
And they will make you feel crazy, and just know that you are actually on, like, a virtuous pursuit.
Yeah.
You are actually just trying to be a person.
Yes, just be a person.
Not a 1960s housewife act.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because you actually can't find love until you are yourself.
Yeah, your trash self. Like, you're truly, because we are all trash, you need to be trash with your chest, your full chest.
Yeah.
Don't be shy to be trash. Be trash.
Yeah.
It's your trash is beautiful.
Yeah.
Your shitty little self is incredible.
Yeah, and don't make decisions about who you date based on who you'd feel proud bringing home to your parents.
Yeah.
Go with your Pornhub search.
Yes.
Go with that. That's you.
Yeah, that's you. Yeah.
That's who you really are.
Date the guy in
Fuck
the
your mom.
Nissan Altima.
That bitch don't know. She miserable.
Date the furry. You need to date the furry.
That's what you're into.
Yeah, that's what you're into.
And you will live a happier, longer life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And final question before we end the episode. If everyone had the freedom to just be themselves, like to have their personal identities back, what do you think love would look like?
Interesting.
Like, what would relationship, not just like romantic, but even just like family, because so much of parenting is based on, actually parents are the first agents of, unwittingly, parents are the first agents of the social identity. They're the first people to be like, no, you need to get good grades, you need to read your books, you need to marry a nice man, you need to be a doctor. Parents are the first people. They unwittingly are.
They're the feds. Let's be honest.
They're the cops who push you into the eventual jail you will end up in.
Right.
And how would all of our relationship with our parents, with our teachers, also, because they are also agents of the social identity, of our friendship, of our romantic partners, how would love be if we were all free?
It's hard to even imagine, because it wouldn't just end at love. I think the whole world would be different. I think we'd go to the moon. I think we'd go to Mars. I think we would have cured cancer, because no one talks about all of the cognitive energy that is lost trying to maintain these lies. You see so many people struggling to maintain these lies. They spend all of their energy trying to convince themselves they want to be this benevolent housewife or want to be this, like, traditional man. ask some women who are married how the marriage is going, and you see them like, and they'll come and they're like, kids are great.
Yeah.
And like that, and you see, so that's energy that she could have been using to like start her Etsy business.
Yeah.
We waste so much energy trying to upkeep these lives.
Yeah.
And I actually think that the world would be a remarkably different place, because it's like what we were talking about in the Soulmates episode, where it's like, well, now you can start living. If you don't have to waste your whole life lying, you can spend your whole life living.
Yeah.
You could do what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
You could pursue. And if everyone was doing that, if everyone stopped lying, if everyone sort of, we collectively dissolved monogamy, and we just like the Soviet Union, like they go on TV and it's like, hey, we're not doing this anymore. If we just did that with like traditional romance and monogamy, the amount of cognitive space we would all have.
Well, also, the flip side of that, if we now normalized being yourself, everyone can be themselves. And then people come out and they're like, well, I want to date my cat and have sex with bunnies only.
Yeah.
To what extent do we accept them?
It's a separate episode.
That's a separate episode. So we'll get into that in the next episode. Should people be allowed to fuck bunnies? To,
One thing I will say, though, is I hate this idea that it is this hegemonic, monogamous culture that is keeping people sane. Because people are losing their goddamn minds now. So the idea that the moral decay is going to come after monogamy is insane. That's real. Because that implies that we're not currently in hell. So I look at it from a perspective of what could be worse.
Yeah.
What could be worse?
No, I agree. Yeah.
Fuck the bunny.
Yeah. Yeah, no, go have sex with your bunny. And that's what today's episode is about.
Isn't that better than being in a loveless 30-year marriage and then killing your family in Cleveland? Because that's like every story I see on the news.
No, truly.
So
go get a bunny. Go date your furry. Go be naked. Go be naked. Fuck what everyone says.
Yeah.
Yeah. And let us know what you think.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye. That was really good.